tuning into this episode of the Empowered Podcast. I'm doing something a little bit different today. Instead of having a guest, and instead of talking about motivation and encouragement, I want to focus on the equipping part of my mission. And if you've been listening to the show, or if you've been reading my blog for any amount of time, especially over the last 3 or 4 months, going back to April 2014, you know that once I started doing the rebranding, once I switched over to ElleryWells.com and changed my brand, I really wanted to focus on empowering and equipping entrepreneurs. And for the most part, with the Empowered Podcast, I hope you really have become empowered, and you've really come to the realization that if it's up to me, or if it's meant to be, it's up to me. Well, in addition to the mindset differences and the mindset changes that we have to make to take our businesses to the next level, I want to talk about the equipment part. I want to talk about the skills and the tools that are necessary to take you to the next level. And to do that, I want to talk about how to connect better, how to sell more, and how to boost your bottom line. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So hopefully this is one of those episodes where you grab a pen and you grab some paper and you take some notes, because I want to share with you some of the things that helped me be extremely successful while I was at my corporate job. But these are some skills and some techniques that I still use and still employ and still I won't say use twice, but that I still use on a frequent and regular basis in my online business, the same as I did when I was working in corporate America. So let's go right in. Have you ever been called socially awkward? Now, if you're like me, you might be very introverted. You might not quite know how to navigate some of these social situations. And whenever you're in a sales position, and again, every single person is a salesperson. It may not be your job title. You might be an admin. You might be someone who is filing the mail. But every single person sells something to someone, whether it's just an idea or whether it's actually a product. You are in sales. So if you're socially awkward, being in a position where you have to sell something, that might be an odd position for you to be in. But have you ever wished that you could just connect with everyone? And I know that I have, and I'm not the best. You might, if you've seen me at an event, I might look tired. You might see me just with my hands in my pockets, standing over in the corner, looking very introverted. And if you see me, that's me just kind of withdrawing and wishing I could connect with somebody, wishing I could break the ice. And if you've ever been in a similar position, if you've ever done something similar or found yourself doing the same things, you and I are in the same boat. But when it comes to predicting future success, if you were to be able to look at where you are today and say, I will or won't be successful in 5 years, or if you were to look at somebody else and be able to predict if they were going to be successful 5 or 10 years from now, how well you and that person are able to connect with other people will be one of the largest determining factors of that success. So let me say one more time. When it comes to predicting future success, how well you connect with other people is going to be a determining factor. Now, again, like I just mentioned, when I was working in my corporate job, I was pretty good at this. I was very good at connecting. And in fact, I was on an episode of The Sales Evangelist, which is hosted by my good friend, Donald Kelly. And we talked about some of the things that made me successful as a salesperson and at navigating through corporate America. I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. So if you want to go to empoweredpodcast.com/53, I believe. Let me make sure that is right here. Yeah, go to empoweredpodcast.com/53. You will see a link to that episode of Donald Kelly's podcast, and I highly recommend that you check it out. But when I was working in my corporate job, I had people at all levels of the business asking me how to build better relationships. In fact, sitting at a business dinner, one of the most successful account executives that we had in our territory, in our team. I mean, he had been an IT manager, and the company had hired him, so he was already in with a lot of these people, and he was extremely successful. But sitting at a business dinner one night, I remember it was here in Round Rock. It was at, I think it was at a Gumbo's restaurant. It was a Cajun restaurant, and it was all paid for by the company, and it was very, very fancy and expensive. But sitting at this dinner, this high-profile account executive asked me, he said, Ellery, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, Ellery, what is the secret to building relationships? How do you do it so well? How can I connect with my customers better? Well, needless to say, I was kind of shocked that this field rep, this person who was meeting customers face-to-face all the time and who is supposed to be excellent at this, was asking me how to build better relationships. So he was the salesperson. He was supposed to be the expert, but here he was asking me how I was able to do it. How was I able to build successful relationships with people, not only over the phone, but they're hundreds, if not 1,000 miles away, and I might never even meet these people. He's meeting them face to face and asking me how I do it over the phone. Well, while I believe being a good connector is kind of an art form, my friend Jared easily does a fantastic job at this. Being a good connector is an art form. I also believe that we can get better with practice. And by doing what I'm going to share with you in this episode on a frequent and regular basis, anyone can become a good connector, if not a great one. But first, here's the bottom line. If you get only one thing out of this podcast, and I want you to keep listening, but I'll explain this here in more detail in a couple seconds. But here's the bottom line. You can connect better and succeed in business by building better relationships. You can connect better and succeed in business by building better relationships. Does that sound simple? Maybe. Maybe not. If you're super introverted like me, maybe it's not as simple as it sounds. But as with everything that takes skill, playing basketball, playing football, we're in the middle of football season, better players practice more. As with everything that takes skill, it's easier said than done, and practice will help you all along the way. So, how do we do that? That was the bottom line, but how do we actually do it? How do we connect better? How do we sell more and boost our bottom lines? Well, at the end of the day, succeeding in business comes down to who we know, who we like, or who like us, and who we trust, or who trusts us, depending on your perspective there. Getting customers, bosses, and team members to know, like, and trust you will make you successful. And to help you be successful, let me share some of these tactics to go along with our strategy. So our strategy is to build better relationships. Our tactics are the things that we do on a daily basis to make it happen. The first one, and I think we've got 4 here. The first one is call people by name. Now, that may seem fairly simple. That, what else are you going to call them? Hey, you, or, hey, boss, or whatever. But I'm talking specifically calling people by their first name. And this one might be somewhat controversial. I don't know if you would find this strategy, or this tactic rather, in your Sales 101 book. They might not teach it, but whenever I used to call somebody on the phone, and I still do whenever I get podcast guests that are rich and famous, or, they're millionaires, they're CEOs, I call them by their first name. I don't call them Dr. Smith. I call him John. I don't say, hey, Mr. Kinson. I say, hey, James. When I called Jim Stovall, who is a best-selling author, he's won an Emmy Award, he's a decamillionaire, meaning he has more than $10 million. When he answered the phone, I said, hey, Jim. And he said, hey, Ellery. And it was really cool because we were able to establish that immediate connection, that immediate friendship there, and it would have been different if I said, hello, Mr. Stovall, or whatever else you might say, hi CEO Stovall, or Emmy Award-winning Stovall. Calling people by their first names for me, has led to a lot of success. And while this tactic may not be for everyone, it worked for me. Calling someone by their formal title, Mr. Stovall, Mr. Smith, Dr. Jones, whatever it is, calling someone by their formal title does two things that you might not even be thinking about. Number one, it puts an invisible barrier between you immediately. Friends don't call each other Dr. Smith. If they do, they go around saying, hey, doctor, they're probably douches. I'm just going to say that right now. Friends don't call each other Dr. Smith or Dr. Bob or whatever. Friends call each other by their first name. They say, hey, James, what's going on, Ellery? And we do the same thing. Friends call each other by their first name, and we do business with our friends. The second thing that calling people by their formal title does is it tells the other person or their admin. I don't know if you call them secretaries anymore. That's probably not politically correct. You call them admins, I guess. But it tells that person or their admin that you're immediately a stranger. If you call me on the phone and say, "Hi, Mr. Wells," I will instantly know that we don't know each other. Nobody calls me Mr. Wells. It's happened a couple times. Some of my coaching clients do, but I don't think that lasted very long. But if you say, hi, Mr. So-and-so, it immediately says you don't know each other. And again, I do this and you do this, but we do business with people we know, not strangers. So again, like I mentioned before about the admin secretary thing, when trying to get past an admin or secretary, using the target, whoever you're trying to get to, whether it's the boss and it's their admin or it's a contact person at a company, using the target's first name assumes familiarity. It assumes that you're already friends and that you know each other. So calling someone by their title puts you in a submissive and unfamiliar position. You know, if you call somebody doctor or president or what, not Mr. President, that'd be maybe something else. But calling someone by their title just generally means that you aren't equal. And I always went into doing business thinking that we were equals, not I'm your servant or I'm your slave or you're doing a favor by doing business. We're here as equals. You have a choice who you buy from. You have a choice who you pay or who you promote. And I have a choice to who I sell to as well. And that's even more true as an entrepreneur. I don't have to sell to everybody. But calling someone by this official title usually leads to a submissive / dominant type relationship, and that's not really good for business either. And that's what I found, and that's just my opinion, but that's absolutely what I have found. You want to be seen as equals. So the second thing on how to connect better, sell more, and boost your bottom line is find and establish common ground. The first rule of resolving any disagreement is to find common ground. How are we alike? We want to focus on how we're similar and what we agree on instead of how we're different or in what ways we're different. And though we're not arguing, we're not. You shouldn't see selling something or making a connection with someone as going to battle with them. Though we're not arguing, placing a focus on our similarities, on how we're the same, is a great way to break down barriers. We like people who like what we like. And if a customer sees you as someone who they have things in common with, or your boss sees you as an employee who they have something in common with, they're more likely to trust you. And the more they trust you, the more that they will buy from you. If you're both from the same state, talk about how much you love that state, or just talk about how much you love Texas, because Texas is pretty awesome anyway. But if you both left, if you're both, if you were both from Texas and you moved to, California and New York, don't talk about how you're on opposite coasts. Talk about how you were both from Texas, and maybe have a connection on why you both left. You needed a change of scenery. You both left for jobs. You both left to get married. Focus on how you are different. Focus on how you are the same instead of how you are different. If you both went to the same college, boom, you're in. If you both enjoy racquetball on the weekends, boom, you're in. Hopefully you get the idea. But by finding common ground, you'll have an edge over your competition. Whether you're competing for a new customer or a new promotion, you will get further if people know who you are and what you're about. And you can do both of those things. You can accomplish both of those things by finding and then establishing this common ground. The third thing is learn 3 fun facts about each person that you meet. If there was one thing that was guaranteed to set you apart from your competition, whether it's competition for a job or competition for customers, this one will do it. This is where I succeeded and just left other people in the dust. Learning seemingly random facts about my customers made me more successful than anyone else on our sales team, and honestly more successful than anyone in our entire department. There was 15 to 20 people on our team and 150 people on our department, or in our sales department. We did a $2 billion a year business. My part was roughly $15 million a year, and this one right here, this 3 facts about each person that you meet, that made me more successful than anyone else and any one of these salespeople doing all of this business. Over a 4-year period, doing this right here, I averaged, I think, like 130% of my quota attainment. So that's over 4 years. So even when I didn't make it, I did so well that it made up for it, all because of this. So here's, for example, I was able to talk to Vicky about the bathroom that she was modeling. Kathy and I talked about her son who is in the Air Force, and I was able to talk to Brian about the headaches of being outbid on several houses he and his new wife were trying to buy together. But you see what I did there? No longer was I Ellery the sales rep or Ellery from XYZ company. All of a sudden, by having these conversations, these little quick things before we got down to business, all of a sudden I was Ellery who cares about what I'm doing, what's important to me, and asks me about what I'm going through. Instead of calling a customer and asking if they have heard about your latest product, your latest solution, your new tool, whatever it is, imagine this. Imagine that you could call Susan. I'm just making up a name here. Imagine you could call Susan on the phone and ask her how her sick son was doing. Imagine you could call Jim, and instead of asking if they'd made a decision on who their vendor was going to be, imagine you could ask how he was feeling after his car wreck. Do you see the level of connection there? And just as a side note to all of this, this is something I believe that the Arab culture does fairly well. And what they do is before you can get down to business, it's part of their culture, and it's seen as a negative thing. Like they don't do this. They don't go right down to business. And I would try to conduct my business how they do it. What they would do is if they had an hour meeting, the first 15 to 20 minutes they would sit there and drink tea or a cup. They would have a beverage, and they would just talk. They would just build connection with one another. And going back to that know, like, and trust thing, they would spend 20% of a meeting or more building that know, like, and trust factor. And I think that's one of the things that helped me stand out amongst, and I wouldn't call them competitors, I would call them teammates, I guess, but well, you could call it competitors too, because I stole a lot of business from other IT companies who were selling competitive products. So I would probably, you could throw competitors in there too. But these tiny bits of information, how the sick son was doing, how the car wreck was doing, how the remodel was going, or the son in the Air Force, all of these little things combined creates a human-to-human connection. Corporate America doesn't really teach this. In fact, that's why this account executive that I was mentioning just a few minutes ago, he'd been at the company way longer than I had. He's had more accounts. He's had more experience. He was much older than I was. But nobody had ever taught this to him. And the whole time I was there before, found myself in a position where my boss didn't like me, all of that stuff we talked about in empoweredpodcast.com/49 in that episode. I was the only one teaching this kind of stuff to my peers, to new hires and things like that. But corporate America doesn't teach this kind of human-to-human connection because it is just a few steps too far removed from being tied direct to the bottom line. The company that I worked for, and maybe the company that, if you're listening to this and you still have a corporate job, maybe your company's not exactly this way, but if it wasn't tied one directly or just maybe one step removed from being directly to the bottom line, they didn't care. They didn't care at all. And so when I started a book club to focus on personal development and build leadership skills, they didn't care. So why would they care about building human-to-human connections and learning 3 seemingly random facts, fun things about every single customer that you have? Why would they teach that? Well, they didn't. And that's why I stood out, and nope, only a few people did. But by learning at least 3 facts, 2 doesn't cut it, 2 is a cop-out, 3, 4, 5 or more. But by learning at least 3 facts about each person that I spoke to, I was able to generate millions of dollars in profit for my company. $15 million a year in sales over 4 years, so that's $60 million, and I was running it at a 25% profit rate. I was a very profit. Well, it could have been closer to 20% profit, but either way, 20% profit on $60 million. I was able to do that because of what I just shared with you. So if you don't think that this applies to the bottom line, I don't know why you're listening at this point, but it does. I was able to steal business from my competitors, and I was able to create loyalty with my customers because I cared what their day was like outside of the office. And I could end the episode there because I think that is so powerful, but I won't. I got one more for you. The last thing that you can do to connect better, sell more, and boost your bottom line, the last thing is ask more questions. Sales 101, shut up. Seriously, stop talking. And it's weird when you're a new salesperson. It's like negotiating. Whoever talks first loses. But this is one of the most undervalued skills when you are learning how to sell things and connect with other people. Have you ever walked into just the I don't want to say the lunchroom or the cafeteria, but that takes me back to elementary school. But whenever you walk into like the teacher's lounge, or you walk into the faculty lounge, or whatever, wherever your colleagues and your peers eat lunch, does the room go quiet? Do they know that you're going to dominate with your comments and your activities and your actions and your experience, or does just life go on and people scoot aside to have you come and sit at their table? The same exact thing has to do with sales or building any kind of relationships. People love talking about themselves. I don't want to say that's one of the appeals of having a podcast, that you get to talk and talk and talk, but you get used to your own voice. And have you ever heard the term? Well, you probably have. He or she likes the sound of her own voice. Well, that's going to kill you in sales and building relationships with people. So sales 101, shut up. Stop talking. The same skills that make you friends will earn you customers. No one wants to hear you speak for 30 minutes straight about how you and your product is the greatest thing since the invention of the wheel. Now, when I went to, and just as a side note, there's a difference between building a relationship and a presentation. And side note to the side note, most people don't like presentations. TED Talks, not really presentations. If you've got a bunch of slides and that kind of crap, nobody wants to listen to it anyway. But That's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about building better connections and better relationships. But when I was speaking at Podcast South Florida, I tried to interact with the people in the audience. There were 25, 30 people are there, and I brought in useful tidbits that other people had shared with me. I asked questions. There was Q&A. They came to hear me talk about something, but I didn't want it to be all about me. And if you're trying to build a relationship with somebody, nobody, again, wants to hear you speak for 30 minutes straight. Your passion is great, but your customers don't care. Well, they definitely don't teach that in Sales 101 either. Your customers, they don't care about how passionate you are. They're only interested in how your service will fix their headache. And people need to remember that. If you're going for a promotion, your boss only will care that you can get the job done. You can have all of the passion in the world, but if you're incompetent, you're not going to get hired, and you're not going to get hired or promoted, from your boss or from the customer's end either. Asking targeted questions, which you will have the ability to ask these targeted questions if you listen. But by asking these things, your customers will tell you what they need. Now, that's something else that they don't teach a whole lot. Maybe they do. Maybe I've been out of the game too long, but I don't think so. But if you ask good questions, people will tell you how to meet their needs. Imagine you went in to buy something at a retail store, and they asked you not just what size pants you wore, but what are you doing? Where are you going? What's the event? If there was the invitation, did it say black tie? Or, you think about how much better service you would have if the salesperson just asked you questions instead of just saying, oh, what size are you? Here you go. Here's your nice pair of pants. But here's an example. Far too often, I would hear salespeople talking about this hot new selling point of a new product. I was in technology, and we were coming out with new technology, new model numbers and everything every 12 to 14 months. And people would go in and they would say, hey, here's this great new technology. Here's this new widget that would just meet all of your needs, only to find out that they were selling something that the customer really had no desire to buy. After shutting up, these salespeople would learn, and I made this mistake too. Don't get me wrong. I probably could have had more success, sold more, and all of that other good stuff if I had taken all of my advice every single time I was on the phone. But I know I didn't. So just in full disclosure, there were a lot of mistakes that I made in things that I would do differently as well. But after shutting up, these people would learn that the customer was more interested in tried and true technology instead of these latest and greatest features that these salespeople would be talking about. Imagine, again, back to this retail store example. Imagine that you walked in and the salesperson already knew that you were going to a wedding and you needed a new suit or a new dress. And they said to you, I know about this wedding. I already know the colors. And I know you are struggling to find something that fits in the shoulders or fits around your waist. It's the perfect length and the right color. Just it's elegant but sexy at the same time. That sounds very targeted to women, but I guess men can be sexy too. But imagine that you went into the store and that was the kind of response that they were able to give you, instead of just say here's a dress or here's a suit. What if they knew all of the problems that you were having and said, here is something that will meet all of those needs? But here is something to remember. Until you can describe your customer's problem better than they can explain it themselves, your job is to ask more questions. I'm going to say that one more time. Until you can describe your customer's problem better than they can explain it themselves, your job is to ask questions. And the same principle applies to getting a job or getting a raise or a promotion. Until you can describe what your boss and the company needs, you need to be asking questions. If you want more money, until you can determine exactly what your boss is looking for in this new position and the gaps the company has that you can fill, your job is to be asking questions. That's what you need to be doing. When you can position your service as the piece that fits in your customers or your boss's puzzle, they will buy. When you can position it as the perfect or as close to perfect puzzle piece to fit in this hole, then they will buy. When you can do that, when you can position yourself as the person who provides what the business needs or who can do what the business wants to do, then they will buy. And the last piece of advice for this, and we'll wrap it up, is don't be afraid to say, I don't know. If you don't know the answer to one of your customers' questions, faking it will end badly. I was able to gain more trust by telling a customer I didn't know something than by dodging the question or making something up. And just saying, I don't know, or I don't know, but I'll go find out for you, that short phrase does so much for building good relationships. Not only does nobody like to do business with or be friends with a know-it-all, but by just saying, I don't know, I mean, that establishes common ground. You both don't know. You'll both learn together, and you'll both learn something new. That was a tactic that I used quite often. And here's the flip side of this. Make people feel good about themselves. Instead of asking them questions that they don't know the answer to, assume that they've already done it. So I said that would be my last tip, but here's the last one. I would say this all the time. And one thing, and this helped me get so far so fast with my customers, assuming that they had already done. Say, I'm sure you've already thought of this, but, and then go on with your statement. Instead of, have you thought about it, assume that they have. And then you're assuming that they're intelligent. And most of the time they're like, no, I hadn't. Sometimes they're like, yeah, I have. But you're not putting your foot in your mouth. And you're really connecting with people, again, on a one-on-one level, on a human-to-human level. And hopefully all of this stuff is going to really help you take it to the next level. This is how you connect better. This is how you sell more, and this is how you boost your bottom line. And hopefully this is a good separation from what we normally talk about here on the Empowered Podcast. Again, I do want to empower you. I want you to live tomorrow better than you're living today. I want you to have all of the tools in your tool belt to really go make a difference in the world. But today, again, I wanted to share just some of the tactics that go along with the strategy. So to recap, number 1, call people by their first name. Number 2, find and establish common ground. Number 3, learn 3 fun facts about every single person you meet. Number 4, ask more questions. And then as a bonus, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. And then as a second bonus, lead every sentence saying, I'm sure you've already thought of this, and just see what happens. And before I say my final goodbye, I want to mention my small group mastermind. I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. I don't even know what episode number that would have been. But I am building a small group mastermind. It's already built, but I want you to potentially be a part of it. And if you are looking to build and grow your online business, but you need the accountability, you need some additional help, and you want to surround yourself with people who are doing things that are similar to what you're doing, maybe outside of your industry, but you're just looking for that extra support, head over to ElleryWells.com/mastermind and sign up there. And if you still have questions, schedule a meeting with me, all that good stuff. But I built this for the purpose of helping you and people like you connect with one another and get things done, move the needle, make a difference in their life, and really start something excellent My final thing here before I go, I just wanted to say thanks to filmmaker Doc, Jimmy Burgess, juicingradio.com, and Matt Lovell for leaving me a all 5-star rating and a great, fantastic, wonderful review in iTunes. I haven't mentioned those in a long time, and I'll throw it in here. Go to ElleryWells.com/iTunes. But if this podcast, if my show or this episode specifically has helped you in any way, ratings and reviews, they're fantastic. But do me a favor. Would you just tell somebody about it? That's all I want you to do. Just if this has benefited you or just put a smile on your face, would you tell somebody about it? Again, thank you for listening to the Empowered Podcast. My name is Ellery Wells. I've been your host today. Head over to ElleryWells.com/awesome. I've got some free stuff for you. We'll talk to you next week.